What happens when an unsuspecting submissive falls into the wicked clutches of three enthusiastic femdoms? Hello, my pets, and welcome into The Dungeon, the podcast for submissives to learn, grow, be entertained, and to ultimately find empowerment in their lifestyle. I'm your host, Kat Nash, the Music City Dominatrix, and today's episode, I'm actually going to be reading an email from a submissive of mine. Now, if you have not listened to Teamwork Makes the Dream Work, an episode that I published previously, I implore you to go check that out. You can either listen to that one first or this one, but they're both the same story. The originally published podcast was me and two other awesome femdoms recounting the story of a session we had with a submissive. But today, I am reading his words directly, and I will try to keep my comments, my interjections to a minimum. Welcome to Friday Night at the Mark. Dear Goddess Cat. Oh my God, this is going to be hard for me not to interject and add my commentary to this shit. For clarity's purposes, I will try to refrain. Dear Goddess Cat, thank you for assigning the task of retelling Friday night's events at the Mark from my perspective. It's like being commanded to replay it in my mind over and over again, complete with all the hotness and excitement. Please rest assured that from the sub's perspective, it was every bit as hot, exciting, intimidating, and overwhelming as you had hinted at. And did I mention very fucking hot? Considering it now makes me think, first of all, about how we got to that night. As you know, I had, over many years, experienced a variety of pro-doms at various establishments. Almost all of these, while fun and pretty hot, always left me with a feeling like, yeah, that was good, but now what? I want something else. I began investigating the idea of long-term relationships, FLR, and in general, strong, powerful, confident women who would be something other than kink dispensers. He put that in quotations. That, thankfully, led me to your podcast and website. When I inquired, you graciously agreed to allow me to meet and perhaps session with you, and things just grew from there. One of the earliest times we met, you became aware of my fairly regular habit of drinking more than a person should, and my many failed efforts to correct it. While your sub wasn't necessarily convinced it was that big of a problem, as my goddess, you deemed otherwise and assigned it as an absolute objective to abstain completely. To that end, you cajoled, persuaded, assigned tasks, and pushed me to level up. I specifically recall a night at the Mark that involved, in your words, beating the alcohol craving out of you. I don't remember that, but it sounds like me. Anyway, there were times I thought you might disown me, and to my listeners, I did get very close to it. If a sub can't follow directions, I have no use for him. Then one day in November, and I can picture exactly where we were at the time, a Turkish restaurant on Nolensville Pike, we were sitting across the table from each other. If memory serves, you had just got done expressing your disappointment with me, saying, "It's because of your behavior." I may be paraphrasing here a bit, but the discussion then became, I have this idea for a scene I would like to do with you at the Mark. I think you would like it, and I know that I would, but you have to earn it. To get there would require that I succeed in giving up the alcohol for at least 2 months. You had me intrigued, captivated, and very motivated right from the start, despite the fact that you wouldn't even give me a hint other than to tell me that you thought it would be wildly hot. Despite my many previous failures, cheat nights, and disappointments, your patience and willpower finally prevailed. So, although my success was due mostly to your persistence, you indicated that this scene was to be my reward for alcohol abstinence. Still no hint at what it entailed, but I was so very hooked that it didn't matter. Then the wait, and as you like to say, the marinating started. As you know, partly due to a nasty winter storm, it took 4 months or so after you first brought up the idea to get to last Friday night. Since you had hinted and suggested that what you had in mind was going to be so good, without ever letting on about what exactly you had in mind, by the time we got to last Friday, your sub was absolutely wired. The question, what has she got in mind for that night, must have gone through my mind a million times. In one message, with still a month to go, you added the line, "You're gonna love March because I think it's wildly hot." And then the build-up and taunting even continued right up to the very end, with me kneeling on the floor, blind, earplugs in, while the three of you were laughing and carrying on just far enough away that I couldn't make out the words. You may or may not have planned it that way, but for your poor pitiful sub, it was deliciously devious. In retrospect, all of that made it just that much hotter. The waiting and wondering all just added to the buildup. In the end, however, the reality far surpassed anything I had imagined. Thank you. So, on Friday night, I was to meet my goddess at the mark and was told to wear a coat and tie, etc. This in itself seemed interesting or odd, since such attire is pretty unusual at the mark. After meeting in the parking lot, we had a little idle chat in the lobby along with coffee and water, and eventually I was asked, "Are you ready?" Oh my goddess, yes, 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 and maybe. Just a quick housekeeping note. As the scene detailed below started, I had been referring to the ladies out of force of habit and training as goddess and mistress. I was corrected a couple of times, with them in the role of sexy, somewhat vindictive schoolgirls. It was to be, for example, just cat, as opposed to goddess cat. However, for the purpose of telling my story now, it just seems necessary to include the appropriate honorifics. We entered the play space at the mark, and almost immediately I was hooded, collared, and told to insert the earplugs that were handed to me. Then, being led on a leash, we proceeded to a quiet corner area of the floor. I was commanded to kneel and hold her drink, still dressed in coat and tie, while she would go talk with her friends. I could hear laughing and talking, but couldn't begin to make out the words due to the earplugs, so even more build-up and suspense. Thinking about it later, I'm quite sure that Goddess Cat was fully aware what effect it was having on me. I remember thinking at the time what I must have looked like to the others in the area. Here's this guy in a coat and tie, no less, kneeling submissively, head bowed, holding a drink in his hands, and just sort of hanging out. I felt rather conspicuous, maybe with people wondering, what's going on there? The feeling of being conspicuous only increased over the course of the evening. Eventually, Goddess Cat returned, touched my shoulder, and asked again in that sultry, suggestive voice, "Are you ready?" Oh my goddess, please, 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 yes. With that, I was told to stand, and together we removed the hood, and I was told to remove the earplugs. It was then that I found myself looking at not only Goddess Cat, but her two friends, Mistress Scarlet and Mistress Fallon, all dressed as cute schoolgirls, apparently intending to take out their frustrations and aggressions on the hapless, unsuspecting, pain-in-the-ass principal, me. I was about to be at the mercy of three sexy, somewhat vengeful, fun-loving schoolgirls bent on a measure of retribution. To digress just a bit, early on, as Goddess Cat had made clear to me her thoughts on viewing porn, which of course she does not allow her subs to partake in, she became aware that I had been intrigued by scenes in which multiple mean girls would gang up on some poor submissive. Having tucked that away in her memory, it had now surfaced in the form of this scene. As a side note, it didn't occur to me until the next day that I had never actually been part of a roleplay scene. Everything up to that point had always been mistress, slave, dominant, submissive, etc. This was new territory. But the three would-be schoolgirls, all dressed for the part, were very much in character and ready to play. There were numerous suggestive comments, taunts, and remarks directed my way. These were accompanied by much giggling and lots of seductive, sexy looks. It was fairly clear to me by that point that the three schoolgirls were planning to address some issues and concerns, and that it would soon become clear who was really in charge here. So without delay, they started on my clothes. As I stood there trying to comprehend a bit of what it was about to happen, sort of like a deer in the headlights about to be run over by a car, my coat was wrestled off of me. The tie went next. It seemed to the young ladies that my shirt tail was overly long, and they were struggling to get it untucked. Their frustration with it resulted in me simply being instructed on what to strip off next, while much giggling, outright laughter, and suggestive remarks were heard. There's sort of a foggy recollection of a suggestive teasing, swooning, "Oh, Mr. K," as the pants came off. Eventually, I was down to my boxer briefs and socks. It was then that Goddess Cat, standing right in front of me, looked at me with a devious gleam in her eyes and yanked my boxers down to my ankles, saying, "Step out of those." This, of course, was accompanied by much laughter from the other ladies. So there I stood, with only a pair of black socks on my feet. It's always seemed like a really silly look for an otherwise completely naked man to be wearing a pair of socks, but I had never actually been instructed to take them off. I wanted to. I sort of needed to, but things were way out of my control at that point. So there I stood, feeling like I looked really silly. The ladies led me over to the monkey bar apparatus, where Mistress Scarlet proceeded to use a necktie she had been wearing to secure my wrists effortlessly and effectively, more or less at shoulder level, and then things started in earnest. It was sort of like, at that point, it occurred to them all that they had this poor sub bound and helpless, and imagine the things we can do to him. Various impact instruments were used in turns by all three girls, as if they had been turned loose in a toy store. I think they pretty much tried out every implement Goddess Cat had brought with her, which was a pretty impressive assortment. There were paddles of all sizes and description, floggers, and that mean thing Goddess Cat refers to as her lollipop. There was wood, there was plastic, there was rubber. The three girls were circling around me like cats, deciding on how best to fuck with a mouse before devouring it. We must prolong the fun. It was amazing, pretty hot, and a little scary to watch them just feeding off each other's energy and ideas. What one didn't think of, someone else did. Let's try this, let's try that. At the time, I was just sort of reacting, but thinking about it now, that whole dynamic really made the entire scene so much hotter. The combined energy, playfulness, and deviousness of the three ladies just sort of seemed to snowball. Among other memories, there's Mistress Scarlet literally dancing circles around me with this mischievous gleam in her eyes as she attacked with some impact implement from the front, back, and sides. It's all a little blurry, but it feels like she made several orbits that way, smiling the whole time and seeming to take great delight in my predicament. I was being circled and surrounded by these three hot, mischievous women, not knowing what was coming next. While one of them used some sort of implement on my ass, thighs, and back, another lady was right in my face, smiling and giggling, or more likely, making a comment about the unfortunate situation that I had gotten myself into. About that time, positions would be switched and a new face would appear in front of me, each time with the lady taking satisfaction in my helpless situation. And truthfully, that was also very hot for the poor hapless principal, too, to be ganged up on with no available recourse because, of course, being tied to the monkey bars tends to limit one's options. And at the mercy of these three fun-loving and somewhat sadistic young ladies was really pretty intense. Now tell me, what self-respecting submissive wouldn't find that to be wildly hot? Thinking about all the various implements and activities that were employed is just a little overwhelming, and I'll probably miss one or two, so maybe next time those can be repeated just to drive home the point. Someone, of course I have no idea who, perhaps all three girls, used that vicious waffle paddle along with a paddle with hearts carved into it. There were a couple of Wartenberg wheels which needed to be employed on all sorts of areas of my body, and a penis pump that seems to be great fun for the ladies. If you're not familiar, this thing is fitted over the hapless male's penis, preferably flaccid at this point, and the women holding the other end proceeds to pump the air out with a suction device, thus lengthening the man's dick. The fun for the women seems to revolve around achieving a certain length. It's marked off in both centimeters and inches. This night, each lady took at least a couple of turns with the pump, apparently trying for a specific length. In the end, failure to reach said target obviously was the fault of the wayward principal, resulting in more derision, laughter, taunting, and teasing. Eventually, the girls decided to move on to other fun and games and just left the penis pump dangling there from me with a warning to not let it fall off. Throughout the scene, there was a constant exchange and banter going on between the three ladies. Again, the three women were just feeding off one another all night. Lots of comments, suggestions, and one-liners were voiced. Some probably meant to be heard by the victim, but most really just the girls having fun together. Among other things, there was Goddess Cat saying, "Hit right here at the base of his ass, so when he sits down, he'll feel it." While I couldn't see her face at that moment, it certainly struck me as having been said with much glee. True. I could just imagine her face lighting up as she said it. Then there was Mistress Fallon sitting down in front of the hapless principal with her skirt hiked up, saying, "I'll bet you like to see what's under this skirt, wouldn't you, Mr. K?" The practically incoherent reply being, "Uh-huh." The result was not what the poor, pitiful sub was hoping for. It involved Mistress Fallon's middle finger sending a poignant message. At some point in the proceedings, and since it was all running together at this point, I'm not exactly sure when, the poor hapless principal started to get an erection. Okay, this is where I, Kat, need to interject. He had a fucking hard-on the whole entire time. I don't know what he's talking about. At some point he started to get one, but he had a hard-on the entire fucking time. And you can ask the ladies that. Back to the story now. That, of course, provided another fun avenue for abuse and humiliation. In addition to being another object for inflicting impact damage, which they did, it provided a place to hang the various impact implements the ladies had been using. It was mentioned by one of the girls that it was like decorating a Christmas tree, and look, these balls are the ornaments. I believe they got 6 toys and paddles and such to hang there, which of course then had to be struck with some other implement in an effort to dislodge them. Paddles, floggers, and a variety of other devices were employed. I believe the girls knocked 4 of the 6 off, while giggling and chatting about the best device to use, never mind whatever collateral damage might occur. Since the whole scene was sort of a tag team event, one of the ladies was frequently right in front of me, just watching, smiling, and often making comments about the state of things and asking whether I was learning anything, whilst the other ladies were beating my ass. There's just something so fucking enticing about looking into the eyes of a strong, confident woman while her girlfriends are beating your ass or playing a game of tic-tac-toe on it. Seeing the dominance and ownership is just electric for this sub. Speaking of tic-tac-toe, that provided yet another opportunity for all sorts of fun stuff, including more serious impact enjoyment, some competition between the girls, and, oh yes, more teasing and taunting. There was a whole assortment of markers in various colors. Additionally, as it happens, one of her impact toys is thoughtfully equipped with a studded X on one side and an O on the other. These things in combination made for a couple of rousing games of tic-tac-toe on the ass of the poor, pitiful sub. That would be me. Use the markers to draw one grid on each ass cheek and then strike with the appropriate weapon multiple times. I have this recollection of Goddess Cat informing me at the conclusion of the game that she had lost. The tone in her voice seemed to imply that it may have been the sub's fault. Not sure I followed the logic here, but not to worry. There was a second chance for victory on the other side of the ass. Being occupied by other thoughts by then, I couldn't tell you who won the second game. Along with the tic-tac-toe games, the markers were also put to good use, applying various monikers. It was only later in the evening, alone in my hotel room, that I learned what they were. Butt slut, written all the way down my left side, sort of stood out. I think perhaps butt slut was the result of a marker being dropped on the floor behind me. One of the girls cheerfully offered, "I wonder if he can pick that up between his butt cheeks." So with that, the game was on. The answer was that, alas, butt slut couldn't get down quite far enough, try as he might. Not sure if I could have squeezed hard enough to pick it up anyway. There seemed to be some debate on that score amongst the women later on as well. I remember thinking at the time, how does this look to the people gathered around watching this scene? This naked guy, his wrists tied to the apparatus, trying to stoop low enough to grab a marker off the floor between the cheeks of his butt. I live to please and amuse my goddess. This was most definitely one of those times that if she thinks this is hot, if it pleases her, if this amuses her, then it's what I live for. What a good sub. Since I tend to be pretty vocal when experiencing pain, Goddess Cat often threatens the use of a penis gag that she brings along. Once again, we got to that point on this night. I'm not sure, but my foggy memory suggests that while some portion of the ass beating was going on, she actually looked at me and asked, "Do I have to use the penis gag?" I vaguely recall just nodding at her with a forlorn look on my face. So after forcing it as far into my mouth as possible, she fastened it around the back of my head and we moved on to nipple clamps. These were initially clothespins. As usual, they weren't too bad until they were removed. But that apparently only motivated further, more serious efforts. With me obviously within earshot, Goddess brought out what were described to the other ladies as really nasty. They even experimented with them a little, giggling and deciding that yes, they were pretty gnarly, all while I was treated to the same dialogue. So I think we should try them. Kat attached them and then did that thing she does where her sub is required to basically not react. You need to breathe and settle down while I count down from 10 or these don't come off. It was torture. Yes, those damn things definitely got my attention. But, and this is the key for this sub, the whole time Goddess Cat, in this case Schoolgirl Cat, was right in front of me, boring into my eyes. There's just something so fucking amazing and captivating about being drawn helplessly in like that. With about 2 seconds to go, she threatened to start over because of my rather weak performance. She probably would have gotten me to cry yellow if she had done that, honestly. However, it would have been deserved. I was barely holding my own. There's no question in my mind that she gave me a pass on that one. I learned later that there was some disagreement between the ladies as to whether the forced calm down might have been too cruel. Kat, of course, didn't think so. As crazy as it sounds, and after all the games, the impact toys, and the teasing, that was probably the highlight of the night for her sub. Those clamps were painful, but to suffer for her, to try so hard to please her and do her bidding is just so fucking appealing. To be held there, looking into her eyes while she is demanding control of my reactions and emotions is so very hot. It was at that point that things pretty much wrapped up. The principal was asked about the girls' new grades, stupidly answering, "You got an A." Thus, more markers were used to write A+++++ wherever it was deemed appropriate. Even after being released from the monkey bar apparatus, they still had to try out a couple of new toys. Why not? I live to serve. Beyond the specifics, there are just a couple of other general thoughts. Number one, having these three ladies feeding off of each other and messing with me was really an amazing experience. For me, just the dynamic and the energy were so good. Please use me again anytime you wish. Number two, it seems important to note that during the scene, each of the women quietly checked in with me at some point. Are you okay? Despite everything that was going on, it was nice to feel cared for and protected. I was asked about a least favorite part, and hopefully it doesn't come across as dodging the question, but I really can't think of anything. Perhaps just the fact that at some point we had to walk away. Along those lines, if I were to change anything the next time, I'm wondering what it would be like to go into a similar scene but remain blindfolded the whole time. Other than probably being able to recognize the voice of my goddess, what would it be like to not know who else is involved, not see the faces, just react to the voices and the sensations? Maybe at the very end, the blindfold is removed and everything is revealed. Just a thought. The drive back to my hotel had me just shaking my head and mumbling to myself. Now, a week later, as I write this, it's still sort of just being in awe of these three women and how it felt to be there in the moment. Absolutely amazing. Thank you, Goddess. And that wraps up the story of one poor, pitiful submissive and three badass femdoms from his perspective. I hope you enjoyed this story time. Feel free to reach out to my email, thewildcreatrix@gmail.com, or check out my website, www.cat-nash.com. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I enjoyed reading his input. Please join me next time, and in the meanwhile, stay kinky, my pets.